Hey everybody, welcome to Mother Hustlers, the podcast. I'm your host, Janelle Powell, and welcome to our inaugural episode. And today we actually have with us Rubain Manzoor and a little bit of history. I've actually known her for a few years now. We met a few years ago through a mutual former colleague. Shout out to Ali. So it's great to actually kind of come back together and have this conversation. And today we're going to be talking about having a support system. And I thought this would be, such a great conversation to kick off the podcast with, because I think if you are a mom who's trying to balance career or entrepreneurship, being a present and active parent, along with just prioritizing your own needs, whether that's mentally, physically, or whatever, I feel like you kind of need some sort of support system to help you kind of make it all happen. So I think it's important to talk about that. And that's what we'll be discussing today. Before we jump into the good stuff, I'll let Rubain kind of give us a little introduction, let the audience know a little bit about her.
Yeah, thank you, Janelle. And thanks for having me. Super excited. A little, under pressure because this is the very first podcast. But yeah, I am Rubain, as you introduced everyone. I'm a content designer. I've been a content designer for the last 3 to 4 years, but my career is, I started as a content writer, and this was like 6-7 years ago. And I'm a mom of 2 boys. I live in Toronto with my husband. And yeah, I'm just in that aspect of my career where it's just like, I find I'm at a level where I think I know what I'm doing now. Initially, I have 2 boys. I have a 4-year-old and a 9-year-old, and who's about to be 10 in a couple of weeks. So yeah, I really, when we initially spoke, I really loved the concept of having this podcast just because, I'm really appreciative that now we're having these conversations. I wish we had this, sort of this platform 8 years ago, 9 years ago, where I was like a new mom, and it was such a struggle.
Totally.
But I'm so glad that we're finally having this, these conversations and like these platforms where we can sort of, contribute to the, back to the community and the working moms. So, yay.
Awesome. Well, we're so excited to have you here. And just to give my audience a little background about me, I am in, do I say mid-30s anymore? I guess I'm in my mid-30s. I have 2 kids. I have a 7-year-old and I actually have a 10-month-old. So I had a baby last year. And I realized after having my first son that there's like so many conversations about like balancing motherhood and work that just kind of like we don't feel confident having these conversations, and they're happening in the back of our head, and there's so much pressure and so many emotions that we go through. And I thought that this would be a really good platform to share those conversations. So today our conversation is kind of centered around the whole idea of having a support system as a mom who's trying to balance it all. So I guess the first question that I want to start off with is like, what does your support system, I'm assuming you have a support system, Rubain, but what does your support system look like?
Yeah. Very frankly, my husband is my biggest support system, but I'm very lucky because I live very close to my parents, and my mom and my sisters have been absolute a godsend. Especially, I know not a lot of people have the luxury of living close to family, but I've just been really way.
You are blessed because for myself, my boyfriend and I would say he is my support system because for me, I immigrated here. So all my family, my immediate family, my parents, my siblings, they live in St. Kitts, which is in the Caribbean or in the United States. So I don't have any immediate family that lives here that I can lean on. And then my boyfriend, his parents, his siblings, they live here, but they're about 40 minutes away. So we can kind of lean on them, but they're not if it's something that happens really quickly, it's kind of it's a little bit tight. Yeah. So it's one of the things that we realized when we maybe a year or 2 after having our first son, it was kind of a standard job that has no flexibility isn't going to work for us and the type of parenting that we want to do. So that was like when we first realized, like, okay, we have to kind of set up a support system, a kind of a way that we can both get what we need out of
Yeah.
our careers and
Yeah.
also be there for like our kids and prioritize ourselves.
Yeah.
So many say it takes a village when it comes to raising children. And like, how has this phrase resonated with you and your experience with motherhood and trying to balance like your career or even entrepreneurship?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such a powerful reminder that, like, motherhood and career are not solitary journeys. Like, they're two completely
Yeah.
different things where we sort of try to mesh them together. And, like, and I think that's the biggest problem that we have as, working moms or like
Yeah.
in general. We're always conditioned to think that, like, we have to be the best at everything. We have to be the best mom,
Yes. Oh,
wife, the best daughter, like the best employee, be there for your friends. And like, and now because of social media, like throw these like extravagant parties, whether it's a birthday
yep.
or like Eid or Christmas, whatever it is you're celebrating. So there's like this
Yeah.
constant, and it is so tiring. I think like, again, I'm so glad because I see some women having like, these conversations. I know like me and my girlfriends, we always complain about this. Like whenever we meet, whenever we hang out, it's just like, oh my God, we are so tired. But it's
Yes.
because all these like things we've like manifested or like, we're like conditioned to do and think that it's honestly, it's like, it's like exhausting. And secondly,
It
it's like
is.
extremely unattainable. Like you can't do everything all the time. And I think like
Yeah.
that's the crux of it, like, where we need to sort of, come across that realization that it's okay. Like, what? My house can be dirty. It's funny because my older one, he's almost
Yes.
like obviously my husband and I both work from home. And like, we have two boys, so obviously it's gonna get messy. And like, first I was like, okay, I have to keep
Yep.
it clean all the time. And now it's just like I'm like, it's okay. If the toys are scattered on the ground,
Yeah.
and it's funny because my, sometimes when I'm, in this like mode of like rush cleaning or like rage cleaning, my son comes up to me and like, so who's coming over? Why are we cleaning the house? And
Oh my gosh, my son does that too.
I'm like, cleaning it for myself because I cannot live in this. Because okay, I was like a slob, growing up. I did not care if my room was clean or not. But now that I'm
Right.
in my 30s too, and now I'm just like, okay, at the end of the day, when I come out of my office or like I'm working from home, I need the space clean. So like,
Yeah.
these, like things that we set for ourselves where like, because at the back of my mind, it's like, okay, like, initially I used to clean because what if somebody drops by? Like, what are they going to think about my house?
Yeah.
Not keeping it clean. And now it's more so like, okay, like I need to keep it clean for my sanity. So
Yes. Prioritizing yourself and just, and also just taking the pressure off, right?
exactly. And now I'm just like, okay, you know what? That's fine. If I'm going to ask my husband to do something, like I'm not going to be, very paranoid and be like, okay, you have to do it like right now, which a lot of us do. Or like
Yes.
ask my to pick up the toy, like I'm not gonna be after them. I'll be like, you know what? I've asked them to do it. I'm gonna like, remind them here and there, but I'm just not like, take it upon myself where it's like, okay, you know what? I just finished a 6-hour job. I'm gonna clean the house. I'm gonna like, serve dinner and whatnot. So I mean, I feel like, it just really comes back to the expectations. But we need to like, break out of this stigma really. And then like, really start leaning on our partners, even our children if they're older,
Yes.
and our family and friends.
I think the big thing is, as moms, like you said, we've been taught that we have to be superwoman. We have to do it all. We have to be perfect while doing it and smile, keep that smile on your face. Because people almost make you feel like if you say that you don't enjoy certain aspects of motherhood,
Yeah.
that like you're ungrateful or like it's just wrong. But like two things can be true at once, right? And
Yeah.
I think that when we don't enjoy certain things or certain things are just hard because of the pressure and the expectations, that it's okay to lean on people. And like, this is something I learned myself, like ask people for help. And like, there are people, I'm lucky enough, I'm blessed enough to have like women that live nearby me that have children in my son's grade, and like they're like my friends, and they'll take my son for a little while,
Yeah.
they'll take him to the park if I'm busy and stuff like that, and lean on them. And I'll give you an example where I realized that like I really have to like lean on my community, lean on the village. Is I remembered I remember last year, just shortly, maybe, or actually it was this year, early this year, just maybe like a month or two after having my baby, my second son, my hubby, my boyfriend, he was picking them up from school on a regular basis, my older son. And one day at the last minute, he couldn't make it. So he was like, "Could you please?" He's like, "I know this is kind of awkward because you have to drag the baby into the car and go pick up our older son." And I was like, "Yeah, no problem, no worries." Went to the school and I couldn't find parking close enough, so took the baby out, started marching, going down to go get my son, and I actually tripped
Oh
while
no.
holding the baby.
Oh my God.
Yes. And I was able to like hold him up in the air and like take the brunt of the fall. But like one of the moms who know me quite well, been to my house, like I've had their kids over and stuff like that. She said to me, she asked, first of all, she helped me up. She asked me if I was okay. And then she said to me, she said, "Listen, if he couldn't come, you could have asked me. I would have picked him up."
Yeah, I
And
know.
and then the light went off in my head like, ah,
Like, oh
why
yeah,
didn't I think
yeah, absolutely.
why did that not come to me? Why do I think that I have to do it all by myself? And
Exactly.
she's like, "Yeah, I would have happily picked him up and dropped him off."
No,
And that was the moment where I was like, I don't have to do it all. Me and
exactly.
my hubby, we don't have to do it all. Lean on your community, right?
Exactly. Did you find so with me being a first time mom, I was a very like anxious mom. And I feel like it wasn't until I had my second son where I became more conscious of being vocal about needing support or like requesting support, whether it's my husband or my mom or like even like friend, because we used to live in a condo before here and same story. So I was like 8 months pregnant and like, going down the condo, waiting for the elevator, picking him up because, there were like 10 buses that used to come down to pick up my son.
Yeah.
And one time I was like really rushing through it. I lost track of time. And the same scenario, like, when I got there, like huffing and puffing, and like a friend of mine who lived in the same condo, she had already gotten my son off the bus. And it was the same. Like,
Oh,
it's like, okay, like you're 8 months pregnant, you can stay home, we'll bring him up.
yeah.
It was like, you know what? Yeah, that's fine. I've gone through that entire being that helicopter parent and like that being that anxious mom where I have to be everywhere for my son,
Yeah.
for my child. I think for second time mom, I was a bit more relaxed. And now I'm just like, okay, I'll take all the help I need.
Yeah, because now you're now you're like, okay, I got it, but I don't got it. So let me ask for help where I can. And
Yeah,
that's just it. Like I have no problem saying like, "Hey, can you watch him?" or like, "I need to do this," or and it's taking moments for yourself too and leaning on your community for that. Like they're like honestly, as it sounds so weird, but like as a mom, like I enjoy going to Walmart by myself now. So
with
there are times where like
two
I'll
of
wait for my hubby to come home and be like, "Hey, I'm running to Walmart for a bit."
yeah, that is so
And
true. Yeah,
just
I think
self-care.
yeah, we've all done that. Like, late night, like, there's like 10 o'clock. I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Walmart because it's, open till 11. So I think we've all done that, which is crazy.
Yeah. So now like we're talking about motherhood and kind of letting go and asking for help and like leaning on the support system. So when you think about like your career goals, are these things that you communicate with your part with your husband and talk about like where you want to go and how that might affect them or how the existing arrangement as far as support goes and how you balance things amongst each other?
Yeah, you know what? It's a really great question. So, I'm trying to be really like, making a conscious effort of communicating with my husband. And like, although we don't have regular check-ins, obviously when, it's like taking on a new job or like making a big decision, obviously like, we communicate and we talk about things and like, make sure that it's, geared towards like, our future goals when in terms of like, family or
Yeah.
financially and things like that. But I think we were just out the other day and I told him too that, we really need to make an effort to like, have that level of like, be there for each other and like, make
Yeah.
sure that we're communicating regularly rather than like, when something like big happens. And I think regular check-ins are really important, just have like a space and just be like focused on like, having that sort of relationship with your partner. And I think for
Yeah.
us, the biggest problem, like, we haven't been able to do it is because like, we work from home. We're both, work from home remotely full time.
Yeah.
have kids. So Monday to Friday, it's just like, the week just like literally flies by. You
Fly
know,
by.
at
Yeah.
swimming, like, my older one has like, soccer or like math class. And, so we don't really have that time to sit down and like really breathe and just like ask each other, how's your day? Like, what happened? What's happening? So, it's just funny because we both are home and like,
I
working
know.
in such close proximity, but at the same time, we're like, not like really talking to each other. So I think recently what I've started doing is like really making an effort to like have like a coffee date. So like drop off the kids, grab a coffee,
That's really good.
or like, when the kids are in school, like, grab lunch together just so we have like alone time, like, phones away, just like talking to each other. And I think that's where, we sort of find ways to like, support
To
our partner.
communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually a really good idea because I'm in a similar situation where like my hubby, he's an entrepreneur
Yeah.
and he ends up being home a lot. But when we're home, there's like a structure to the day because like I'm deep in the computer banging away at the keys and like he is more focused on other things. And then, like God bless him, because when my son comes home, there's like an hour and a half to like 2 hours where he's just in the zone with my son, making him read and do like practices writing and stuff like that. So like you said, like you just kind of get caught up in the day and then it's like, oh my gosh, it's bedtime, right? But you're right. It is important to have those conversations to kind of like ensure everybody's on the same page and everybody's getting what they need and want out of the situation. So like even us, we find ourselves having those conversations every now and again because for him it's like talking about like expanding his business, like how do I, what we need to do as a family to ensure that everybody is getting what they need out of the situation. And that kind of brings me into the next question of like, how do you ensure that you play a supportive role for your partner or even just other family members that are a part of your support system to ensure that, you are getting where you need to get career wise, but they also are getting what they need to do in terms of what goals they have for their life?
I think this is repetitive at this point, but I think like open communication or like the key is communication. So like, whether
Yeah.
it's my sister or my mom, like, the thing is like, because I live so close by to my mom and like, we visit them often, we see each other like, so many times like throughout the week or like, throughout the month where it's like, I want to know what's happening in their life. So I make it a point to like, ask them how they're doing or like, just like figuring out like, okay, what's going on and just being like conscious that like, now I think that I sort of have some sort of structure around my life where I have to,
Yeah.
things are like calmed down or like, we have a, way of doing things. I think I have the time to sort of like focus on other people because first at that point, and I know it sounds really selfish, but initially like I didn't have to, the time to think about anyone else because I was so drowned.
Yeah.
But now that like, I'm at a spot where it's like, I have like systems in place. I try to like, just really be cautious and ask, whoever it is, my friend, my husband, my mom, like, how are they doing? What's happening? And just like, really just listening for some cues where I can sort of jump in and offer help.
Yeah.
Just because like, a lot of times, like, my mom or my sister, like, whenever they hear if I need help or I'm struggling, like, they don't think twice. So I try to do the same.
Yeah. They jump in.
Yeah. With them.
That's good. And it's so important. And then, one, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day and we are kind of talking about like relationships, particularly marriages or even just long-term relationships where you may live together that, and I think it was based on something that I had heard Michelle Obama say where like the relationships never balanced 50-50 all the time. Like
Yeah.
sometimes you got to take a back seat so that that person, like your partner, your husband, can take a bigger role because, right now it's their turn to focus on their goals
Yeah.
and you have to make some concessions. And sometimes it flips the other way a few years later. And I think I definitely see that in my relationship where like,
Yeah.
I remember maybe like 2 years after my first son was born and we kind of had that discussion of like, yeah, we really need flexible jobs to kind of make this work because like we both work 9 to 5, but then, daycare closes at 6, but we're both like an hour commute. So like, how do you get, like, who's going to pick him up from daycare? And then you start having these conversations and you're like, oh my gosh, how is this going to work? And then he decided that, he wasn't seeing the growth that he wanted in his career at the company that he was at. So he wanted to take a plunge into being an entrepreneur, which meant, things change, even financially, like things change. And now there's like a sacrifice. And I was like, do it.
Yeah.
Like, let's do it, you know? And at that point, he took the forefront, and I kind of like made certain concessions so that he could start that journey. And like, because I knew that tables turn, he would do that for me too. And like, it's flipped around. Like, there have been moments in my career where it's like, okay, I got to go do this. I'm going to be traveling a bit, whatever the case may be. You're going to have to kind of pull up the slack, and he jumps right in. So I think that's a big part of like being in a relationship and like having kids, and not even just being in a relationship, because you can be co-parenting and
Yeah.
still have these discussions where like one parent may have to pick up the slack a little bit more than the other because, certain things and certain goals are trying to be achieved.
Yeah.
So I just like I put that out there because I just want people to understand that like relationships aren't always going to be 50-50. So just never look at it as like, from now until eternity, you always are going to be equal. They're going to be this way, that way. And you got to kind of go with the ebbs and flows to make sure that everybody gets what they need out of the situation,
Exactly. And I think it,
is what I think.
yeah, no, you're right. And like, it's really important to understand that, not many people understand that, like, what your partner may be going through, or like, even if you're co-parenting, for example, like sometimes like, we're so, everyone has their own struggles and like their own challenges on a day-to-day basis as well. So I think it's really
Yep.
important to be like emotionally aware
Yes.
what your partner needs, or like, at, a certain point in time, and like making a certain like, changes to, your lifestyle, or even like, putting your goals and your objectives on hold for a little while while your partner,
Yeah.
goes out to achieve those. And it's vice versa too. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, can you think of like I'm sure that your husband has empowered you, but have you thought, are there moments in time where like maybe you doubt yourself and where you're trying to go with your career and your support system is like, listen, get it done.
Oh my God, so many times. And I have to like, yes. So like, I've spoken a lot about my husband. So he's definitely like the biggest like, support system that I have, and like the biggest cheerleader. But it's, it's mainly has been like, my group of girlfriends. Like, me and my friends have been together, like, we became friends like in grade 7 and 8. And like we have
Oh
this
wow.
friends where I'm really, really lucky that like, I have that sort of village as well, where like, we're just really constantly supporting ourselves. And I think having, again, like, having friends who sort of like, are going through the same struggle. So like, we're all moms,
Yeah.
right? We've all like, one of our friends, was the first one who got married right out of high school, like, first year of college. And she has like older kids. We have younger kids. So like now we have like kids in like sort of almost every age bracket, and we sort of just like lean on
Oh,
each other,
nice.
and like really just like, talk about like, whatever challenges we're facing, and just like lean on their example and their, lived experiences as well. So I'm sorry, I don't know what the question was. I tend to sidetrack a lot.
No worries. It was just about like moments of self-doubt where your support system might encourage you to,
Yeah,
to to take that leap, and letting you know that they have your back.
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, coming back to the same. So like, I've been really lucky that all of my, so I have, I guess, different villages, if you want to say it. Like I don't have one big village.
That's
Like I have
perfect.
sets of villages. I have my friends, and then I have my family, and then I have some colleagues as well who've been like, like it's, I've been incredible to meet, to meet like so many different people throughout my, career. And like, it's like you sort of lean on different villages in different, through different challenges, or like through different aspects of your life. So yeah, it's definitely like just everyone's willingness to show support and like provide you like, those like nuggets of advice that you need, especially when you're like self-doubting yourself.
You mentioned something that's so important. You talked about different villages.
Yeah.
And, that actually is a really great point, because having different villages in your support system is really important, because you have like your immediate family
Mhm.
who, you might be able to depend on for childcare, emergencies,
Yeah.
things like that, or just, your general encouragement. But then you think about that you might have a village at work too, your
Hmm.
coworkers
Yeah.
who might take into consideration the fact that you're a mom and you have kids, and will understand that you may need a little flexibility, whether that's ending your workday a few minutes early to go pick up your son, or that you might pop out for like 15 minutes of the day to go pick them up and come back up and get started again. But just kind of taking those considerations and making sure that you have what you need to be successful and still be a mom. I think that's really important. And we don't always see that in our careers. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming, because you mentioned having these different villages, do you find that you've had villages at work during your career?
Oh, absolutely. And like, I want to shout out back to Ali because she was my first, I want to say, support system or like that colleague where I was like, okay, you know what? It's okay to be a mom and a working mom. Like,
Yes.
I'm mom first and then I'm like an employee or like someone like who needs to do something. But yeah, but I've been like incredibly lucky that way where like every role that I've taken on, I've only encountered like, people who've been extremely supportive and extremely understanding. And I think like, full disclosure and disclaimer, like I've mostly worked in like remote jobs like pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
Like, I know like working remotely has like, extended from like, that, the pandemic era and because of COVID. But like I've always worked remotely or freelance. So like, I've been very big on, building relationships, whether it's been my manager, my boss, or my colleague, or somebody I'm reporting to, or somebody who's reporting to me as well. So like, again,
Yeah.
like I think all of these things have proven like really helpful in like creating those like different villages as well.
Oh my gosh, shout out to Ali again, because she was my first like work village too.
Oh my.
Because I'll tell you this, when I started working with her, I
Mm,
remember it was like when I was on maternity leave and I didn't want to return to my previous role because just based on my experiences with them when I was pregnant, I was
mm,
like, yeah, this isn't gonna be a good situation once I have my child. So I
mm,
started looking, and I ended up working with Ali, and she was so understanding that I was a mom.
yeah,
And she just gave me so much grace. And like to this day, I think she has been one of the best people that I've worked with, because it's about she's so much about like, what can I do for you to help you advance your career, but
yeah,
also make sure like you get what you need as a person too. Like she didn't just see you as a number, as an employee, but like somebody that was human and had needs.
exactly.
And I will never forget that, because that made such an impact on me, especially at that time, because that was actually my last job where I was like physically in a
Yeah,
workplace.
yeah,
And she made that work for me. And similar to you, I've been working from home pre-pandemic, so like when COVID hit, I was like, oh, nothing changes.
exactly. So while everyone was like panicking and like implementing these processes and tools, they're like, oh my god, how are we going to communicate and like what's going to happen? It's like it's like yeah, we took a
I've
back
been
seat
doing this for years.
to that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been lucky enough, even with my remote jobs, that particularly my most recent job that I left, my employer, Derek, like he was awesome, because he was just like, listen, like, I know you're a mom, I know you have things to do. So long as you get the work done, so long as like your days are productive and like where we need to be as a team, do what you need to do. Go pick up your son, go to the parent teacher meetings, like get it done.
Yeah.
I don't mind. You're human, you have things to do. Just get the work done.
Exactly. I mean,
And
that's what it is at the end of the day, right? Like as long as employers are getting their work, on time, I think it shouldn't matter
yeah,
if you're working from home or not. But that's another conversation.
I know. But it's such an interesting conversation, because it does play into that support system. And so many, I mean, we've been lucky, but like when I talk to people, there's so many women who feel unsupported at work. And it just makes being a mom harder
Yeah.
when you live in a society that's telling you, I mean, not even telling you, you live in a society that it's becoming really hard to not work as a mother, because everything's so expensive. The cost of living is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So many women, they'd want to stay at home, but they don't really have a choice because of the financial aspect of it. So
Exactly.
society is telling you, go back to work, but your work's telling you, I don't care that you're a mom and that you're here. Like, that's not my problem. And then it's like, how do I balance both?
You know, exactly. And like, it's funny because you mentioned this because my last role, I was working for an American company and, a lot of my colleagues, I was the only person from Canada on my team. And because we've been really lucky, like, we have like a really, good, mat leave policy here. And then obviously, like, employers and, themselves are like a little bit more open to people taking, or like women taking mat leaves as compared to the US.
Yeah,
So I think, yeah, you're right. I think when it comes to expectations and like just the societal pressures, it's just insane.
it is. And I keep asking myself these questions, and just even my hubby, like I have these questions. I'm like, listen, how are we supposed to be parents? Like they're telling us the
Yeah.
population's aging, more people, more people need to have kids.
Yeah.
You guys aren't having enough kids.
Oh my
And then you're like, but why would we have more kids
God.
if the system isn't really designed for us to be able to maintain
Of course.
having more kids?
Yeah.
Because school ends before your workday ends,
Yeah.
daycare ends before you can even get to the daycare. Like, how do we make it all work? And it's been one of those things that's just been like at the back of my mind for so long. And I guess that's why this whole conversation of a support system is so important to me, because well, it's a system that is designed to not to take into consideration that you're a parent. You have to have a support system to
Yeah.
make it work.
Yeah.
And one thing I definitely want to note here is that everybody's support system might look different. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be married and husband and wife and wife, whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
because you might be a single mom and your support system might be your grandmother or your
Yeah.
sister or your brother or your best friend. That's okay.
Yeah.
Just lean on somebody, because man, it
Exactly.
is tough out here. Like, take all the help you can get,
Yeah.
honestly.
That makes a lot of
Now, do you have moments when you might feel like your expectations of your support system are too high, or like you're leaning on them too much? Is it like, do you ever have moments like that?
Yeah, definitely. So again, like, in my most recent role, I was required to like travel a lot for work. And then that's where I think, this is just one example. I find like, if I'll be totally honest, maybe I don't lean on my support system a lot or like as much as I should, because I
Right.
still have that, like, like it's really hard to break habits, right? So, like, even though,
Yeah.
yes, I do have a village, but I still feel very hesitant leaning on them too much. But like, in
Yeah.
cases where, when it comes to my partner, my husband, obviously, like, I do tend to lean on him a lot, and vice versa as well, obviously. Like, because we both work from home, and then we both have like, like very demanding full-time jobs, and like having like, kids and everything, like, the balance sort of tips, like, one way or another. But like, one of the biggest examples that I have is that because when I was required to travel for work, my husband was solo parenting for a week, two boys, 2 to 3 times a year.
Yeah.
A lot to ask from him. And I know it's not fair, because had it been reversed, where like, if I'm home solo parenting my kids for a week, like 2 to 3 times a year, I'd be very
Yeah.
as well. So I think it's just like, it comes down to like, just being open to like, asking them firstly, hey, like, before I made any commitments to work, I would make it a point to ask him and let him know that, hey, like, I have a work shift.
Yeah.
What do you, what does your work bandwidth look like? Like, do you think,
Yeah.
any other like, commitments that, you need to look after that, you may have to, move around because I'm away that week. So it's just like really
That's
coming down
true.
to asking, like, if it's okay for him, to push certain boundaries. And like,
Yeah.
something
Absolutely.
that's like been, one of the key things for us, where what I find like, okay, like if I'm leaning too much, like I want to make sure that he's okay. And, when I do come back from that week away, like, I try to give him some alone time, like, hey, go out, like, have a
That's
Saturday off.
good. Yeah.
And vice versa, same as well. Cause
Show some
my,
appreciation.
exactly, my husband, like, loves, outdoors, and, he's out and about, like, especially this time of the year, because of turkey hunting and like, whatnot. So he's like away
Oh,
on the,
that's cool.
yeah. So like, so he makes it a point where, okay, like because I work full time throughout the week, it's not fair that I have kids with me on the weekends as well, when I, I should be resting or like going out with my friends. So like, so he makes it a
Yeah.
point, comes home, he takes care of the kids and gives me like the night off, and vice versa. So I think it's just like really understanding, like being aware that, okay, if we are leaning on our support system, what can we do to, make up for it?
Yeah. Show appreciation. I used
Yeah.
to feel similarly. Like, we had, so when my firstborn, Jordan, when he was little, we couldn't get him into daycare
Yeah.
um initially. So we
Oh,
had a family friend that would actually come to the house and watch him during the day. So they would come over at like 7 in the morning and stay till about like a little after 6. And
okay.
then when he transitioned into daycare, she kind of missed him. So she was like, "Oh, can I get him on like the Saturday afternoons for just a few hours to like hang out with him?" And at first, I felt guilty because I was like, "Oh man, like, like it's my son. I should be taking care of him. Like, why am I now, like, when it's my free time that I can spend more quality time with him, handing him off to somebody else to take that responsibility?" And I felt really bad about it at first, and then I realized, why should you feel bad about somebody wanting to love your child,
Yeah.
especially if they're doing it in a positive manner and stuff like that. My son enjoyed going there, so I learned to kind of let go a little bit and be like, okay, and just showing my appreciation to them, and considering them as almost like family.
Yeah.
And and also just taking that moment, because that meant I had time off.
Yes.
So whether that was just like being a couch potato and watching some Netflix, or like me and hubby going out for like a lunch date or something like that, it gave us a little bit of free time where we can prioritize ourselves, and which
Exactly.
is really important. And like, I want people to understand that having a support system isn't just about going to work and
Yeah.
making money. The support system is
Exactly.
also about prioritizing yourself, your mental health, your physical health. Like, take advantage of your support system, whether it's, have a spa day, or just be able to have some time at home to just decompress, because, balancing career and parenthood it can be overwhelming at times. So, like, definitely your support system isn't just for helping you through your career, but
Yeah.
also helping you with your mental well-being as well.
Yeah. That's a great point. And yeah, I think you're right when it comes to like, talking about support systems, because it's talked about a lot, like from the work perspective, but you're so right. I think when it comes down to prioritizing ourselves, maybe we don't lean on a support system too much, or like,
I
you
know.
think about it. But yeah, that's really a great point.
I think it's because we feel guilty. It's like we brought this child into the world. So it's like ultimately the responsibility is ours.
Yeah.
So when we think about kind of passing that responsibility off to somebody else, whether that is for an hour or 8 hours, we start to feel like, man, I shouldn't really be doing this. Like, it's
It's
my child. I should be taking care of them.
and then
And it's like, yeah,
mom guilt where you're like, oh my God, I've been busy all week.
yeah,
Now it's the weekend. We have to do like, I have to spend X amount of time with my child.
yes.
That I totally get it.
Yeah, and it's like it's okay. Like, don't because the way that I look at it is, if you don't prioritize yourself, then you get overwhelmed, right? And
Yeah.
then you have those moments where like you kind of like you kind of like explode. Like, you find yourself in situations where like the littlest thing
Yeah.
gets you upset and you feeling burnout. And like, you don't want your kids to see you like that. Like, you don't want them thinking like that is life, right? So I
Exactly.
think it's important to prioritize yourself, and it doesn't have to be like an everyday thing. It could be once a month, it could be, bi-monthly, or whatever the case may be, where like you just take even an hour, like lean on your support system. Can you babysit? Can you
Yeah.
take him to the park? Whatever the case may be, and just do something for yourself, because I
Yeah.
think doing something for yourself, or even just do something for your relationship,
Yeah.
it helps to set like a positive example for your kids, so that they can see that there's more to life than just work,
Definitely.
and that like mental health and just balancing everything is important. And it gets you aligned, and you just feel more positive, and then that kind of trickles down to your kids, because your parenting is more positive, because you're not always overwhelmed, right? So it's so
Exactly.
important to take advantage of your support system for that as well.
Exactly. And you're so right. I mean, like, there was definitely a time where I was like really grumpy all the time because I had so much on my plate. I
Yes,
think, like, like, and kids, like, for those who do have kids, they understand, like, kids, like, really, like, pick up on, like, your physical cues and just like your mood in general. Like, even though I won't be like, saying anything to my child, like, he'll come up to me and then he'll be like, what's happening, mama? Like, something's
they
off. They're
notice.
gonna start
Yeah.
questions. So I totally agree with you. I think there was a point where I was like, okay, like I need to take a step back because this is
Yeah.
not working out. Like, I can't be like always in a bad mood, like, always just be tired and like, not like being physically or like mentally present with my kids. Like, dinner time is something where I try to make sure that, my family has like one meal that we're all together. and
Yes, same. We do the same thing.
and then that's obviously dinner because like, we have kids bedtime and whatnot. But like lately
Yeah.
summer, because summer's been crazy, like as always, kids are off school and like, we have
Yeah.
outings and whatnot. So I think we have to sort of get back to that sort of structure as well. But like it all comes down to, yes, making time for yourself and like really understanding that if you're happy, your kids are happy as
It
well.
trickles down to every aspect of your life, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, we're kind of wrapping things up, but like, what advice would you give to another mother who, they're career driven or they're trying to build their business on, creating or building and maintaining a good support system?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing is like, communicate your needs. Like, like be really open about like, what you require and like, whether it's with your partner or with your friend or your family and like really express gratitude about it. And then secondly, I think it would really be like, building a network with like-minded moms or like-minded even colleagues. Like it doesn't have
Yeah.
a female or like a mom. Like, I've found,
Yeah.
support systems in like male colleagues as well who've been super like,
Yep.
open to and like, helpful in, understanding that, okay, I'm a mom. Mom comes first. Like, mom duties come first. And then like, we can always, get work done. So I think really like, just like networking and connecting with like-minded people and then followed by like just really like coming back by giving back. And I think you touched upon this as well, so like giving back to your own support system as well. So like vice versa,
Yeah.
I have my girlfriends, like we all have kids, like some of us have kids around the same age, some are younger, some are older. So like if there's anything that we can do, because they're always like willing and ready to help us, me out with anything, like I try to
Yeah.
be there for them as well. So I think like these are
Reciprocation. Yeah.
exactly. So these are some key things that I think would really help, like, career driven moms to like really build and like maintain these robust, support systems.
I agree. And like you mentioned a really good point that like a support system doesn't automatically mean that it has to be a woman.
Yeah.
Because I definitely think that like support systems can come in any form. They
Yeah.
can come in some of the most surprising places actually.
Yeah.
And that you should, if you're looking for a support system, there isn't really a rubric
Yeah.
because for every person, it might be different and your needs might be different. So just
Yeah.
be open to finding your support system in like the most odd of places, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about like networking with moms who, might have similar kids or kids of similar ages. And that's so important. And like it can happen organically too. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be something that you are like, oh my gosh, I have to do this. Cause I know like with the ladies that I'm friends with in my neighborhood, it kind of like randomly happened because
Yeah.
we all started taking our kids to the park like after school,
Hmm.
like immediately after school. So they would burn off some of that energy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And you
We've done that.
so they yeah, get them to sleep good at night,
Yeah.
right? But like we started seeing each other
Yeah.
at the park every day, right? Or like several times a week. So then you start, hey, how are you? Like, and then the conversation starts. And then from there, it was like, oh, birthday party, and you invite them. And then, like it just became like play dates and stuff like that. So it can organically happen. You just have to kind of be willing to make friends, which sounds so odd because I know some people feel like it's really weird to make friends in like your 30s or your 40s or whatever the case may be. But if you're open to it, it's like the most amazing thing. And I definitely would say like community support counts for something because like I used to live in a condo when my son was first born and we lived there until he was maybe like 3. And like I didn't know my neighbors.
Yeah.
I couldn't depend on like a neighbor to help me with anything or anything like that. And when I moved more into like suburbia
Hmm.
and like knowing the person who lived across the street from me and like down the street and like all these different people in my neighborhood, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so nice
Yeah.
knowing people that are just like a hop and skip away.
Yeah.
And like it was so great when like in summer I'd go outside with my son and my neighbor would be outside too, and she's like, oh, bring him over, like let's
Oh.
impromptu play date. You know?
Those are the best kind of play dates.
So yes, so I definitely would say to any moms out there, like be open for like those relationships that can happen organically with people you might see every day in your neighborhood or your building. And like I said, like don't have a specific box that you put your support system in, because you might find a support system in the most odd places. So like just be open. Just be
Exactly.
open and be ready. And the same way that you have to nurture any other relationship, whether it be a friendship or a romantic relationship, you have to nurture your support system. And you made a good point, Rubain, of like saying like it's give and take.
Yeah.
You can't just take, 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 take. You
Absolutely.
got to show appreciation.
Yeah.
You got to reciprocate. So that would be my advice.
That's great advice.
I think that would should get somebody in the right, get them going in the right direction.
Absolutely.
So, lastly, looking ahead, how do you envision your support system evolving as you continue to grow your career and your personal life?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think the point in life where I am right now, and it may look different for like, somebody else in my age bracket or like, my career would be outsourcing. I think, and, it really comes from a place of privilege. But like, I would think twice about like, having like, like, let's say it's my son's birthday. Like, I'm going to be pressured to, bake a cake or like decorate it or like, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, okay, you know what? It's okay if I don't have a cake. I'm just gonna go grab some cupcakes. Or like, now
Yeah.
where like, being at home all the time and like not having the energy to clean my house. Like I hire like, cleaners to come in like once a month or like every 3 months.
Yes.
Where I'm like willing to spend
Oh,
that money because I think I'm in that point in life where I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna maybe not buy new clothes or like not eat out as much, but I'm gonna outsource where I can to make my life easier. So I think if I'm envisioning my support system, it's like, okay, so I have like, great family, a great set of friends and my husband who are there. But like, I think I'm like building out quite literally by like, having somebody to come in and do something for me if I can. I know it's,
oh my gosh.
a place of luxury and
No.
a place of privilege. Not everybody can afford to do that. And I totally understand that. But like for me, I think that's what the next step wave was for me to like create that support system.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny because me and my hubby, we've talked about this
Yeah.
because we've said, like, okay, we may not be in the place to like financially say, like, okay, we're having a maid come in
Yeah.
or, a cleaner come in 3 times a week or whatever the case may be. But even to have somebody come in once a month and do like a deep clean,
Clean up the house.
like, yeah, wouldn't that just like lift a load off your shoulders?
It does because
And
you know that it's like the majority of the the bulk of the work has been done, and it's not saying that we don't clean every day. I'm sure you're on the same boat. We clean like
yeah,
10 times throughout the day,
yeah,
but just having that peace of mind that hey, like someone's gonna come in. I'm gonna have a clean house maybe for a couple of days, but then yeah, that's what it is.
yeah. And I think it's just being okay.
Yeah,
Again, like to just say, like, I deserve this,
that,
Like I worked hard.
yeah,
I don't have to do it all. And it isn't just like I worked hard as like a mom. If you have a partner too, like you both have worked hard
exactly.
and you both deserve to have, like you said, little luxuries
Yeah,
every now and again that just makes your life easier. And I know what that little luxury might look like is different for everybody.
yeah.
I'm with you on like having somebody come in and deep clean or like, outsourcing certain things. So like I'm totally with you on that. Like I hate doing laundry. So like
Oh my god.
it would be like getting a laundry service, right?
But I
But
wish.
like I think for me, how I probably would see it evolve is, my youngest son, he's getting older. So when he was a baby, I was kind of like a little bit like, he's not going to spend time with people. I want him with me all the time. Like they're so tiny, right?
Mhm.
You don't want to let them go. So letting go a little bit and being okay with like people watching him so
Yeah,
that like I can get time to do the things that like I want to do for myself.
yeah,
And I think I'm like I said, I'm with you there with outsourcing certain things. Like I don't have to do it all. I am capable and I'm talented enough to do a lot of things,
yeah,
but does that mean I have to do it? So
exactly, exactly. And that's a great.
outsourcing some things.
Yeah, and then now that you mentioned your son, I think I want to, another point that I want to talk about is like, because we're all moms. I mean, like as kids grow older, don't hesitate to like delegate and empower them to take responsibility. I think now that my son is almost 10,
Oh
they
yes.
can like not to say that to be like completely dependent on your kids, because obviously everything has to be like in a balance and like you need to have boundaries. But now that those moms who have older kids, or like who are kids are just like in that stage where you can start like sort of giving them little tasks, making them a little bit more self-sufficient,
Yeah.
like fostering that independence. They can be your next support system as well, because I know. So I come from a culture where men have been like traditionally been like the breadwinners. Like, they go out of the house, they bring in the money, and then like the women
Yeah.
have always traditionally taken care of the house and the kids. But like, things are not the same anymore. Like women are working just as much as men are outside of the house. And
Yeah.
not to say that the men aren't either. Like tables have turned. Like, my mom jokes about this so many times with me that it's like, oh, like like we had to grow up, I took care of 4 kids and the house and like in-laws and this and that, and like you have such a like accommodating and like helpful husband, and you're always complaining about it.
Yeah.
I'm not complaining, just like the contrast. Like she did not understand why we're not grateful. I was like,
Yeah.
grateful, but you just like you have certain expectations for your partner, and I'm not saying that he's not great.
Yeah.
Like I've been like really lucky in that terms, but like when it comes
Absolutely.
to like gender roles and like just creating that shift in our in my particular household, where like my kids see both mom and dad working like outside of the house
Yeah.
and inside of the house, and I want to slowly sort of teach my boys to be like self-independent and self-sufficient, so when they grow up to be
So
adults,
important.
equally supportive partners and a support system for their as
Yes.
well in the day. So like, yeah, I think that's another thing that
Oh my gosh. Chef's kiss. That was like a perfect point because you want your kids to kind of learn that they will be a part of a support system, right? They are a part of a support system and they'll grow into being a key component of a support system. So like get equipping them with those tools, right? And
exactly.
you mentioned an interesting point of like your kids kind of like as they get older they start to be a part of like the family support system. And I've actually noticed this lately within my own home because my oldest son Jordan, he's 7, and we now have a 10-month-old Jesse, and like he's crawling and he's on the go.
Oh,
So kids at that age, everything goes into their
yeah,
mouth.
yes.
So now like you
My
have to
brother
be
said,
like on top
yeah,
of like the vacuuming, the sweeping and stuff like that. And he noticed that. He's like, "Oh, he's grabbing at everything. Like we're going to have to start vacuuming like every single day.
yeah,
We can't skip a day."
yeah.
And he's like, "I can do it."
Oh,
And I was like, "Oh."
sweet. Oh my God.
So
Yeah.
and it wasn't so much that he was thinking of like he's doing it to help me.
Mhm.
He was thinking of it from the big brother perspective that he was doing it to help his little brother.
Yeah,
He wanted his brother to be safe. And I thought that was the sweetest thing.
yeah.
So I was like, okay, like you definitely can do that. And like we reward him and we let him know like that's just a part of like contributing to the family and we appreciate it.
Mhm,
But like, as he gets older
mhm.
and when he becomes an adult, like these are things that he'll do in his own home and that he'll have to do eventually when he has kids. So like those lessons, and he understands it because he sees his dad contributing in that way. Like his dad helps out his dad. I am so grateful. Like he's amazing with how he contributes to the household in terms of like doing things around the house, and he sees that. So like he doesn't think like the you have to be a specific gender to do this or that. Like he sees it all, and like I'm so hopeful, and in knowing that like he will be like this well-rounded
Yeah,
great man to
yeah,
his partner one day because he's seeing such a great example in his dad and a great example in the support system that we have as a family.
I know that's like, okay, that's like my dream. Like as a parent, like if my children grow up to be like,
Yes.
very emotionally available, great,
Yes.
like the decent human beings, like that's all I want for a parent. Like, as a parent, like just
Yes.
into like these incredible, like, empathetic, human beings. So, I mean, like that's, I think, the greatest goal that I have as a parent. And I'm sure it's the same for many others.
Yes. And you know what, though? I think this conversation that we had about like support systems, it's so important because I think that's part of molding them into
Yeah.
these great human beings, right? Because
Yeah.
they see these relationships that we develop
Yeah.
and how we nurture them,
Hmm.
how we reciprocate, how we show appreciation, how we show love, and how these people show love and appreciation and help us. And like that's such a positive relationship for them to see. And when I say relationship, I mean that to cover the friends, the coworkers, the family members that are a
Hmm.
part of your support system. When they see the community coming together like that to kind of help the family, then they have such a positive example, such
Exactly.
a positive role model of how things should work, right?
Yeah.
And my hope is that they would take that and be like, wow, this is how it should be, and just improve on it when they
Exactly.
become adults.
Exactly. And I think like, that's how, I think that's how it was for my as well, my family as well. Like, like obviously my parents immigrated here. Like, it wasn't until like, my dad, like, I saw him being very hands-on with my mom and with us as well. And I think like, I took that, and I think my husband saw that as well when he came here. And then like, he sort of built upon that, and we're hoping that our kids will build upon that and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's such a great point. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, the support system that keeps on giving, right? And it's so it's so important. But you know what? We've had such a good conversation, and I think we'll have to have you back for another episode sometime in the near future. But it's been a pleasure chatting with you, Rubain, and I thank you so much for
Oh,
sharing your experiences and your insight with Mother Hustlers, the podcast. Like, we are so appreciative having you here, especially on the inaugural episode. Like, you kicked things off with us in such a positive and awesome way.
thank
So
you so much.
thank you, thank you, thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for thinking of me. I mean, I hope I lived up to the expectation. But
You definitely did.
I know, I mean, like, I can't even believe an hour went by. But yeah, but I really hope that, like, anyone listening can, like, just take away the key points. I mean, like, again, like, our experience is very different from, it may be very different from you or like from anyone else. So, like, but I really hope
Yes.
like the fundamental teachings that you can take from this one is just like always be open to communication, be ready and
Yeah.
to like help, and yeah, like everything like sort of falls into place when as time goes on with that support
Yes.
system. So thank you so much for having me too.
Exactly. No problem. So, long story short, lean on that support system. It
Yes.
helps balance everything out. Communicate with them, let them know what you need, show love and reciprocate their efforts, show appreciation, and things will fall into place. You'll find that balance, you'll find that rhythm, and just I can't say this enough, prioritize yourself.
Yes.
If you're not in a good place, your kids feel that, your partner feels that. So in taking advantage of a support system, it's not just about career, it's about prioritizing yourself as well. So thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you for episode 2. Thank you.